It's very formal. I don't even get called a doctor at work. So thank you, Daniel, and thank you everyone for giving me this opportunity this morning. When Damien asked me about 3 or 4 weeks ago if I would speak, similar to Connor mentioned last week, how you get asked and you kind of consider for a while how you're going to get out of it. And I was on the phone and Aline was next to me. It was actually the last time Damien asked me, I just said, no, actually, I wasn't actually able to. But this time I just said, yeah, no, that's fine. So it was easy to agree. And I kind of had a couple of topics. Well, first of all, I had no topic, and I asked Damien, what's the theme for August? And he said, no, you just pick whatever you want to talk about, which is actually quite wide. So I had something on my mind, and that actually changed about 2 or 3 days back. So I had to text Courtney last night and say to her, listen, sorry, last week when you asked me what I'm going to be speaking about, I gave you a theme of communication, how we speak to ourselves, how we speak to God, and how we speak to others. But that's not what I'll be talking about today. So today's theme, or the title for today, is actually a generous giver. And I have to say, I did check with Quiva if I can use the discussion we had to kind of lead into this, and she said it's fine. So I don't think she's going to be too embarrassed about this. But so Quiva got her first summer job this holiday. It was the first time she actually started earning money, her own money. It's not just the pocket money or the money she gets on birthdays. And before she actually started the job, Nalina actually started a conversation to say, listen, you're going to have some money now, what you plan to do with it? And needless to say, as a teenager, the first thing she said was, well, I'm going to buy myself some stuff, and I'm going to save something, and I'm going to, what you're saving for now, I don't know really what I'm saving for. And Nalina said, well, are you going to be tithing? And Claire was like, oh, no, I will be tithing. And there was a brief discussion about what she has to do with this money. But, it was a big step to actually go from actually getting a few euro every week to actually getting a large amount of money every week after weeks of hard work. But as things went past, she actually, I think about 8 weeks or so, roughly into it, we started another conversation, and this time I was a bit more involved. And it actually led about how to budget. Because for 8 weeks she actually started building up this money, just building up an account. And then Aline said, have you been tithing? She said, no, I haven't. So we did pretty much a mom and a real dad way of approaching these things. And we said, like, what is tithing? And we said, well, you give a tenth of what you get, to give it back to God. Nearly end of story. She then said, but like, if you have more, so we had to actually, that wasn't enough for a 16-year-old, for a small child, we say, you give 10, that's it. But we had to actually go deeper into the explanation. We said, well, if you have more than what you need, you actually give offerings as well. It's not just you give a tenth, you give offerings as well, tithe and offerings. You remember the box at the front of church, and we used to give pastors around, that's tithe and offerings. And then she was like, okay, but why do we do it? And the white spark I was, I said, because the Bible tells us to. That's an easy, short answer, end of discussion. But obviously she needed more. And then we started talking about what the money is used for. I said, well, we have to pay for the rent of the hall, and we have to pay for Daniel's money, and we have to pay for tea and coffee, and we have to send money to India. We do all of that as a church, and the church needs money. That was kind of the why we had to tithe. And that led into a discussion on how you actually tithe. So you can imagine after 8 weeks of her getting a little bit of money into her account, when she did the 10th of that, it was a large amount of money for her. And she said, it's so much, it's so hard. I've worked hard for this money, and I'm just going to give it away to the church. She said, but I give to charities, I give food out to the people on the street. That she works in Grafton in town, and there's food left. She will go and will give it out to the people on the street. She said, I do all of that. And we said, yeah, no, it is hard. It's going to be hard, but it's how you actually approach it. And starting off early, that's actually what Nadine was hoping for. But that first job is to actually install that practice of the moment you start earning to actually start giving. Okay. So we wanted to create that practice in giving back. She's receiving something which she's worked for, but to actually give back to God. Now, Quiva is actually a very giving person, even in the time, and what she gives wasn't necessarily money, but this was actually how to deal with a financial blessing. It kind of reminded me when I was a kid, in our church, or my dad, every Sunday morning, I'm one of 4 kids, so my dad would come into the room and give you a handful of coins, or in the car sitting outside church, the hand will go behind and everyone gets a few coins and put them in your pocket. You go into church and sit down, the basket comes past, you throw it in easy, no problem. It's not your money really. You hardly had it for 15, 20 minutes and it's gone, so it was easy to let it go. But over time you kind of realize, okay, you get the money and the money gets a bit more and you're like, okay, do I put all of it in the basket? Do I keep? So you start to get a bit of responsibility of what you actually do with this money. So you kind of start this regular practice started in our household. You actually, you give to others, and sometimes you give your time, sometimes you have to give your money. But as I got older and I started actually earning my own income, it definitely became harder. Similar to Quiva, when you actually have to work for something and you get the result, it's harder to give that hard-earned cash away. And when you start actually earning a salary, it takes a lot to actually learn how to work with your money, how to manage your money, how do you budget. You have to remember to draw the money before you come to church, to put it in an envelope. If you have a checkbook, some of us still have checkbooks, you have to remember to actually write a check before you come to church. But over time, you actually become into a practice of actually becoming a giver. And if you asked me a couple of years ago, am I a giver? I said, yeah, no, I'm a giver. I give my tithing, I give my offerings. But sometimes it does get harder. Sometimes in my own life, it became harder. I remember when we were saving for a deposit to buy a house in Sligo. You go through this point and say, okay, should I tithe or should I put this money in a savings account because then I'll reach my goal earlier? And never mind, even when we went for the mortgage application, you had to go into the bank. Anyone who's done a mortgage application nowadays, you go in and they scrutinize everything. Everything that goes off your bank account, they go through. And I remember preempting the bank manager asking me, what's this Sligo City Church fortnightly standing order that comes off my bank account? And I kind of thought, okay, can I just say to him, it's a tithe. That might be enough. I might say, well, it's a donation to the church. So what do you think? Okay, or maybe I'll just say it's a donation to a charity. Maybe that's enough. And then I started working in my head over, okay, if I go in and you start asking these questions, how am I actually going to justify in my own heart why I give the money? And I was like, okay, I can say to him, well, I'm not a drinker, I don't gamble, we don't have a flamboyant lifestyle, so I can do with my money what I want if I want to give it to my church. So in my head, going to that meeting with the bank manager, all of that is going through my head. Now, luckily, he actually did ask us, what's this Sligo City Church payment that goes off fortnightly? And I just said, it's a tithe, and that was enough. There was no questions asked, he just went down through the next thing. Every direct debit that went off, he went through, but there was no more further questions. Now, I don't think I got extra points on my mortgage application because I was a charitable person or a giver or was helping the poor, but I never had to answer any further questions about that. Now, as you know, things have moved on and you actually do get your mortgage, but when you go into it, it becomes hard to actually say, should you actually save or actually tithe? And it becomes harder. Now, as we all know, these things, other times it becomes easier and you get into a rhythm. But I've rambled long enough about myself. Let's just quickly see what God actually says about tithing. So I'm going to go into Deuteronomy. Anyway, okay, sorry. I tried. Okay, so we're going to read there. I'm just going to go over. So Deuteronomy 14, verse 22. We're going to read first verse 22 to 26. And it's about tithes. And it says here, be sure to set aside a tenth of all your field's produce every year. Eat the tithe of your grain, new wine and oil, and the firstborn of your herds and flock in the presence of the Lord your God, at the place he will choose as a dwelling for his name, so that you may learn to revere the Lord your God always. But if this place is too distant, and you have been blessed by the Lord your God, and cannot carry your tithe, because the place where the Lord will choose to put his name is so far away, then exchange your tithe for silver, and take the silver with you, and go to the place the Lord your God will choose. Use the silver to buy whatever you like, cattle, sheep, wine, or other fermented drink, or anything you wish. Then you and your household shall eat there in the presence of the Lord your God and rejoice. So you see that it clearly says we should put aside a tenth, 10%. And we put aside of our cattle and our livestock, the Israelites, it was actually the best. And they were going to eat it in God's presence, at a place that he chose, in reverence, in fear of God. And you sometimes think, now I saw what Nolene was packing or started baking some stuff yesterday for this picnic today. Now it's definitely not a tenth of what we've actually earned or produced this year. But today is actually, in a way, what we're doing, what Israelites were advised to do. They bring some of their own food, drink, come to a communal place in God's presence and share it with those around us. But we all set aside some of our food. We bring it here today to this place. And in Gwyneth's message there this morning, or the reminder this morning and earlier in the week, it actually said, if you have a little extra to share for the communal picnic table, there will be something for everyone else. So you wonder, who is this everyone? Who is the others? Okay? Who would have been everyone else in the Old Testament? So if we read on then in the scripture there, from verse 27, and do not neglect the Levites living in your towns, for they have no allotment or inheritance of their own. Okay, so there's the everyone. So we bring more. And the Levites were the priests in the tabernacle and their families. So they didn't have lands and allotments. They couldn't harvest. They didn't have cattle. So the Israelites bringing what they had, bringing their tent, were able to actually provide food and drink to the Levites. If we carry on there in verse 28, it says, at the end of every 3 years, bring all the tithes of that year's produce and store it in the towns, so that the Levites, who have no allotment or inheritance of their own, and the aliens, the fatherless and the widows who live in your town, may come and eat and be satisfied, and so that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. So the other people who are the everyone that we're looking at are the aliens. Now, aliens are strangers, and could be visitors, it could be refugees, it could be immigrants. I'm an alien. Okay, so it's those who didn't know today, who came today, who didn't know there's a picnic. They were going to come to church today, and they're actually going to share in the feast that we have here. The tithe that we bring today, they'll be able to feast on it. It also says, and we learned from the series on Ruth last month, how if you don't have a father or a husband, how that could lead to ruin and poverty. So again, the tithe that they bring is actually to supply and provide for those who are poor and who don't have fathers and husbands to actually earn a living for them. Now, if you see in verse 28, it says there the storehouses. So this is a social welfare system that was actually put into place by God and by the Mosaic law that would actually provide for all. So God counts on believers to provide for those in need. And a habit of regular tithing can keep God at the top of our priority list, plus provide us some perspective on everything else. So he said, every year bring your tenth. Every 3 years bring your tenth and put it in the storehouse. Now I'm sure that tenth that went into the storehouse were able to provide for the 3 years, the subsequent 3 years. Now, so gifting should be at the top of our list. It should be our number one. If we put God in our lives, we should put gifting at the top of our list. And tithing should not be an obligation or a burden. In fact, if giving 10% of your income to God will lead to ruin, you should probably look at how you actually manage your money. You know, if 10%, if you can't do that 10%, you need to actually pray and get some guidance on how you actually use your money. And we were talking about it yesterday with Bill and Helen at the house. And Bill said there's actually two groups of people who find tithing really difficult. It's the poor and the rich. And we know that the poor don't have to tithe because they're actually receiving the tithe. And it's the rich that actually finds it very difficult. So tithing is a privilege. And if we read then in 2 Corinthians 9, verse 6 to 8, Okay. So it says there, sowing generously. Remember this, whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows generous will also reap generously. Each man should give what he has decided in his heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. So, I don't know, I really enjoy, I have a polytunnel at home, and I really enjoy growing vegetables, and we have chickens, and I know Anne and Francis have chickens. You can see every time Anne is at church and she gives someone a box of eggs, you can actually see how she enjoys giving it. And I find it the same. It's when I grow my stuff, my vegetable in the tunnel, it's actually really, I probably enjoy it more to give the produce away than I actually enjoy to actually eat it myself. But I can give away when I have an abundance. Now, unfortunately, 2023, I thought I was going to be smart, because 2022, I sowed and I just had too many potatoes, too many courgettes, too many broccoli. It was buckets of tomatoes were going off. I gave away as much as I could, but I just couldn't keep up. So this year I thought, okay, I'm going to be a bit smarter. I'm not going to sow abundantly. I'm going to sow sparingly. But unfortunately, it didn't work. So this year we're buying tomatoes, we're buying potatoes. I haven't really given out much. I'm looking at every cucumber in the polytunnel, hoping it will be ready by the next week when the one I picked is finished. So I've learned that actually, trying to be sparingly is actually backfired. So yes, I have veggies, but I have no abundance to give away. I can't be generous with it. So note to myself for next year, I'll actually be sowing abundantly and grow too much, and I'll give away, because it's definitely a much more enjoyable experience than actually skimping and stuff. So the Corinthians tells us that we must give cheerfully and with generosity, because it is a privilege. And when you start talking about tithing, I mean, it's a bit of a sensitive subject for a lot of people. I don't know if I'm actually even the right person to talk about it. But I mentioned it earlier, it brings up questions. Should I save in the saving when I want to buy a house, or should I tithe? And what do I do if I'm in debt? Should I be tithing when I'm in debt, or should I pay off my debt first? Is it actually 10%? Is it less? Is it more? All these questions come up. What's the difference between tithe and offering? If the tithe and offerings in church is not enough to build us a new church, should we ask the congregation to give more tithes and offerings? Those are all questions that come up, and I'm definitely not in the place to actually answer them. But I hope that today we can actually just continue the conversation around tithing. In fact, Nolene and I, in our own house now, had an intergenerational conversation, because it was just first a conversation with Fever, then there was a conversation with Bill and Helen, then yesterday we were actually, all 6 of us were sitting in the living room talking about. One thing that Bill mentioned yesterday is he mentioned Mark 12 verse 3 to 17. And that's the type of questions that came up when we were talking with Fever about it. So Mark 12 verse 13 to 17. It said, later they sent some of the Pharisees and Herodians to Jesus to catch him in his words. They came to him and said, Teacher, we know you're a man of integrity. You aren't swayed by men, because you pay no attention to who they are, but you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. Is it right to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Should we pay or shouldn't we? But Jesus knew their hypocrisy. Why are you trying to trap me? He asked. Bring me a denarius and let me look at it. They brought him the coin and he asked him, whose portrait is this? And whose inscription? Caesar's, they replied. Then Jesus said to them, give to Caesar what is Caesar's and to God what is God. And they were amazed at him. So we actually have dual citizenship. We are citizens of a nation. And we're also citizens of the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven. So as citizens of a nation, we have certain duties. We have to pay our taxes, and the taxes are used to pay our services and benefits. So we have to pay Caesar. We have to pay revenue. But our primary obedience is actually, and our commitment is to the kingdom of heaven. So we must trust God in our financial lives. And you say, but who actually benefits from tithing? God doesn't need our money. Like, He doesn't need our money. It is actually to the benefit of the one that gives. So when you actually give your sacrificed portion of your income, it reminds you to rely on God for all the needs that you have. And it also makes us aware of the needs of others. So by giving, you say, well, someone else needs this more than I do. And that helps churches to help others. Severe. So we know that tithing is biblical. It's in the Old Testament and in the New Testament. You say, well, can non-believers tithe? And it actually is no. A non-believer can't tithe. If you don't believe in God, you can't be a tither. You're just a philanthropist or a generous person. But we must also remember that you're not a bad Christian if you don't tithe. God won't love you less if you tithe or don't tithe. He already loves you, and that's it. You can't gain or lose His love. So tithing is a blessing because we are blessed. It is a spiritual topic and actually not a financial topic. And it requires spiritual discipline. So as I was studying this and reading on, I kind of realized that we kind of advised Quiver, not incorrectly, but not very well. Could have done it better. I remember Nadine brought up the one point where she said, before we had kids, we were in Dublin and we were going through between jobs and changing. We just bought a house and we were paying off student loans. We went through a really tight patch where we had no money. There was a week or two that we knew there was nothing. Whatever was in the house and in the car, petrol in the car, had to see us through. And I think Nadine sat down on the couch and she just put her hand, and it was a new couch and we bought it, that's why we didn't have any money. She put her hand between the couch and there was a €50 note in between the cushions on the couch. And so I was telling, Nadine brought this up and I said to Quiver, because we tithe, God gave us that €50 when we needed it. And the more I read about this, it wasn't because we tithe. It was probably because other people tithe that we got the €50. So don't expect your tithing to bring stuff to you. Your tithing is to bring and serve the needs of others. Now, some would actually believe that if you will be financially rewarded if you tithe. But it's because of how you tithe, not because of if you tithe, that you will maybe blessed financially. So if you tithe with the right heart, if you are a cheerful tither or giver, others will see you as a grateful person. They'll see you as a generous person. They'll see you to be fun to be around, smiling, happy. And people see this and they become attracted to you. And when people are attracted to you, opportunities will come your way. That might lead to financial blessings. But it is how you actually do it in your heart. We see that. We all avoid people who are stingy, who are penny pinchers, who are Scrooges, and selfish. You avoid them. So those opportunities might not actually come to them. So to close off. Will I have a different conversation when Cara starts her first summer job? I will. First I'll say, first I'll confirm, and if I have this conversation with Cara or anyone else around tithing, I will say, have you accepted God as your Savior? And if you accepted God as your Savior, are you willing to place God in charge first in your financial setting? And then I'll say, if you choose God to put Him first in your finances, first, and you want to start to be disciplined in that field, to actually start early. We did that. Start early and build it up. But when you start early, be cheerful about what you give. The more you give and the longer you give, it actually becomes easier. I'll advise Cara or whoever I talk to actually pray on it. This is a heart issue and not a euro issue. You must ask for financial wisdom, but you must also ask God to show you how you can help others. And these opportunities might come through church, it might come through work, it might come through any other organization. So you also, one last tip I would give whoever starts on the line is to make it easy to tithe. As I said, start early. Whether you put a little system in place of a standing order or envelope that you put the money in, but do it regularly. It's very easy to tithe here. It's very easy when you're on the street and someone asks for money or there's a joke. But make it easier, make it a part of your life. Be generous to benefit others. We have to fill God's storehouses so it can benefit others. And if we can do it cheerfully, those storehouses will be filled rapidly. Anyway.
Wow.